Chapter 1. The Philistines and Philistia as a distinct geopolitical entity. Late Bronze Age to 500 BC. The Philistines as indigenous people. Epigraphic and archaeological evidence for Peleset and the Philistines. The most traditional and earliest toponyms for the area which became known in classical antiquity as Palestine were not related to Canaan. They were the toponyms of Retinue and Jahi, which might be seen as traditional names, as used in the 14th century BC Egyptian story of Sinew. 1 Retinue was used to refer to the regions along the eastern shore of the Mediterranean and was divided into three sub-regions: Amuru, in the north; Lebanon, sometimes referred to as Upper Retinue, which lay south of Amuru and north of the Litani River; and Jahi, the southernmost part of Retinue, which referred to the regions south of the Litani. To Ascalon, Ascalon, or perhaps Gaza, and as far as the Rift Valley to the east. The traditional approaches to the Philistines, Peleset, and ancient Palestine have been constructed through the eyes of settler colonizers. New archaeological discoveries and epigraphical evidence can help us read the history of Palestine through the eyes of the indigenous. New archaeological discoveries in Palestine, Israel, and epigraphic evidence on ancient Palestine, carved on walls, temples, memorials, gravestones, coins and Philistine graveyards uncovered recently in Ascalon, dating to about 3,000 years ago, Ariel 2017, have all transformed our understanding of the ancient history of Palestine and have resulted in new paradigms which revolutionized our scholarly knowledge on Palestine. A cognate of the name Palestine, Peleset, is found on 5 inscriptions as referring to the settlement of a seafaring people along the southern Palestinian coast from the mid-12th century BC during the reigns of Rameses II and III of the 19th Egyptian dynasty. The 3,200-year-old documents from Rameses III, including an inscription dated c. 1150 BC, at the mortuary temple of Rameses III at the Medinate Habu temple in Luxor, one of the best preserved temples of Egypt, refers to the Peleset among those who fought against Rameses III, breasted 2001, 24, also Breyer 1929-1930, who reigned from 1186 to 1155 BC. Rameses III swore against the so-called Sea Peoples, 1181-1175 BC, placed Peleset, geographically, in the land of Jahi, that is Palestine. In fact, new archaeological discoveries from a 3,000-year-old Philistine graveyard in Ascalon have resulted in a new paradigm on the origins of the Philistines, firmly suggesting that they were not marauding Aegean invaders of the southern Levant or Sea Peoples that appeared in Palestine in the course of the Late Bronze Age, but an indigenous population of the Near East, Evian 2017, David 2017. Since the 19th century, biblical Orientalist scholars have linked the Egyptian cognate Peleset inscriptions with the biblical Philistines. Assyrian inscriptions from the 8th and 7th century refer to this southern coastal region as Palashtu or Palistu. Arabic language epigraphic evidence from Palestine east of the Jordan River is extensive, with some Arabic inscriptions dating from the Roman era and as early as 150 AD. In fact, Palestine is extremely rich in Arabic inscriptions, most of which date from the early Islamic and Umayyad periods. Already in early Islam, Palestine acquired particular religious, economic, and strategic importance. The historical importance of Palestine is shown in the hundreds of Palestine Arabic inscriptions which cover a huge variety of topics: architecture, Islamic religious, waqf, endowments, epitaphs, construction, markets, dedication, Quranic texts, prayers and invocations. A large collection of the inscriptions is assembled in the multi-volume corpus Inscriptionum Arabicarum Palestina, Sharon 1997-2013, Van Berchem 1894. The name Sinaian in the Late Bronze period. The Old Testament is based on exilic and post-exilic imagination, literary invention, and fiction, not facts. Its myth narratives should be read as fiction, theology and literature, not proven facts. The Canaanites are in fact identical to the Phoenicians. The alphabet of the Phoenicians of the coastal regions of Palestine and Lebanon, conventionally known as the Proto-Canaanite alphabet, was given to Greek, Aramaic, Arabic, and Hebrew. However, the Old Testament terms Canaanites and Israelites in Palestine do not necessarily refer to or describe two distinct ethnicities. Niels Peter Lemche, an Old Testament scholar at the University of Copenhagen, whose interests included early Israelites and their relationship with history, the Old Testament and archaeology, has suggested that the Old Testament narrative of the Israelites and Canaanites must be read as ideological constructs of the other, as the non-Jews, rather than as a reference to an actual historical ethnic group. The Canaanites of Palestine did not know that they were themselves Canaanite. Only when they had, so to speak, left their original home did they acknowledge that they had been Canaanites. Lemche, 1999, 152. Literary invention and the fact that exilic Old Testament authors imaginatively coined the term Canaanites, a religio-ideological construct by these authors, does not necessarily indicate that there was a conflict between historical Israelites and Canaanites in Palestine. However, in the modern era, beginning with the late 19th century, European Zionist leaders appropriated the Old Testament narratives as historical accounts and used them instrumentally to justify their settler project and their conflict with the indigenous people of Palestine. Nevertheless, the Israeli-Palestinian conflict is a modern conflict and should not be confused with the real, historical, ancient Palestine or any subsequent religio-ideological constructs of the Old Testament narratives. Historically, the name Canaan was indeed used in the Late Bronze Age. But the name did not always refer to the Cisjordan area from Gaza to the Litani River. Nor was it the only term used in connection with this area, between the Wadi Gaza and the Litani. Other names such as Palestine, as well as earlier names, such as Retinue and Jahi, were also used for this area, including, at times, the inland regions of Western Palestine and the Transjordan, at some point in the course of the Late Bronze Age. Canaan referred to a geographical region of varying size, along the Mediterranean coast of Lebanon, Palestine, and Syria, and not just Palestine. At times this included regions inland. In the first millennium, however, Phoenicia, modern Lebanon, was the most common name used for the northern coastal region, which had earlier been referred to as Canaan, while the Assyrian-derived name of Philistia was most often used initially for the southern coast and later for Palestine as a whole. The name Canaan is found in ancient Near Eastern inscriptions with reference not just to the specific area of Palestine but crucially to Syria from the 15th century BC to the early 9th century BC. The first certain reference to the name Canaan is found in cuneiform on the statue of Idrimi from Alalak in northern Syria, circa 1500 BC, in the form Kinahu. The name Canaan is also found 16 times in Egyptian texts. Of these, 12 are from the New Kingdom, Hassel 2009, 8-17. The name is found on some of the Amarna tablets in the form Knny, about 30 years from the middle of the 14th century BC. In these inscriptions, the ancient port city of Ugarit itself does not belong to Canaan, but Kadesh does. The name also occurs in Egyptian inscriptions in the form K3NN from the 13th century Hattusa, Rameses II and Merneptah inscriptions, this last from c. 1205 BC. On the Merneptah stele, the town Gaza is referred to as the mouth of, that is, the opening to K3NN. The name Palestine takes over from the Late Bronze Age onwards. The international trade between Palestine and Egypt dates back to the Chalcolithic period, 4300 BC, during which Palestine exported copper to Egypt. Also, a large amount of Palestinian, Canaanite, pottery from this period was discovered in Egypt, pots manufactured in Palestine and transported to Egypt presumably as containers of wine and olive oil, Granger 2016, 27. However, the name Palestine first occurs in Egyptian sources from the Late Bronze Age in relation to the Egyptian struggle to control the Philistines during the reigns of Rameses II and III and of Merneptah, 1276–1178 BC. In fact, the name Palestine originally derives from the 3,200-year-old documented name Peleset, used to refer to the people in southern Levant, allies of the Libyans, three who are mentioned in Egyptian inscriptions, including the Merneptah stele, which celebrates the Egyptian victory over Libya. These allies of the Libyans include a number of peoples, besides the Peleset, some of whose names are identifiable. These names include the Shardana, Sardinia, the Ekwesh, the Teresh, the Tieka, the Lukka, the Keta, Hatti equals Hittite, the Amor, Amuru, the Sharsway, Bedouin in the Sinai, including possibly the Asher or Israel of the Merneptah stele. Following the integration of the Philistines with other population, the name Peleset succeeded the name Jahi as the dominant toponym for the region as a whole. From the Late Bronze Age onwards, it should be stressed, the names used for the region of the southern Levant, such as Jahi, Retinue, and Canaan, all gave way to Palestine, the name most commonly used in 8th and 7th century Assyrian inscriptions. Using a part for the whole designation, Palestine came to refer to the greater region, Palashtu, Palest, or Philistia, literally the land of the Peleset, Greek, of the southern Levant. This wider conception included not only the well-known cities of Philistia, Gaza, Ekron, Gath 4 Ashdod, Ascalon, Timnah 5 and Tanta, but served also for the interior of the country and gradually as a wider designation for the whole area from Lebanon to Egypt. Interestingly, also, almost all the toponyms of the cities of Philistia, Gaza, Gaza, Askelon, Ascalon, Ashdod, Isdud 6, Tanta, Tantura, Gath, Jat, Ekron, Akir, survived into the modern era and were preserved in the modern Palestinian Arabic names and were mostly depopulated by Israel in 1948. The names Palest and Philistia in Assyrian sources. In 7 known Assyrian clay tablet and cuneiform inscriptions from different periods, the Assyrians called the region connected with modern Palestine Palashtu, Palastu or Palistu, and called the people who lived in this region Palestinians, Palaraztare, beginning with the king of Assyria Adad-nirari III, from 811 BC to 783 BC, in the Nimrud inscriptions in 800 BC through to Esarhaddon, who reigned 681 to 669 BC, more than a century later, Room 2006. 285, also Smith, G. 1875. 115. The Nimrud inscriptions were discovered in 1854 by William Loftus in his excavations at Nimrud, a major ancient Assyrian city originally known as Kalhu. Located 30 kilometers south of the Iraqi city of Mosul, Nimrud was a strategic Assyrian city between approximately 1250 BC and 610 BC. They are among the best studied of the inscriptions of Adad-nirari III, since they include a description of early Assyrian campaigns in Palestine and Syria. The text of the Sabare Stele, the inscription of the reign of Ases, Nihari III, was translated by Daniel Luckenbill, 1881-1927, an American Assyriologist and professor at the University of Chicago, as, "In the 5th year of my official rule, I sat down solemnly on my royal throne and called up the country for war. I ordered the numerous army of Assyria to march against Philistia, parlere with acute too. I crossed the Euphrates at its flood. As to the numerous hostile kings who had rebelled in the time of my father Shamshi-Adad and had felled their regular tributes or overwhelmed them, and, upon the command of Asia, Sin, Shamash, Adad, and Ishtar, my trust in gods, I received all the tributes which they brought to Assyria. I ordered to march against the country Damascus, Aimriu." Luckenbill 1926, 262-61. The inscription goes on. "I subdued the territory stretching from the bank of the Euphrates, the land of Hatti, the land of Amuru in its entirety, the land of Tyre, the land of Sidon, the land of Humri, the land of Edom, the land of Palastu, as far as the great sea of the setting sun. I imposed tax and tribute upon them." Grayson 1996, 212, see also Luckenbill 1926, Smith, G. 1875, 115. The Palestinians are also mentioned in the Nimrud letters, which contain cuneiform texts of royal correspondence from the reigns of Tiglath-Pileser III and Sargon II of Assyria. The correspondence includes the letter of Kurdiasha-Lamor to Tiglath-Pileser III, dated c. 735 BC, concerning the ruler of Tyre, about whom the king said, "Talk nicely to him, all the wharves are at their disposal. His subjects enter and leave the warehouses at will, and trade. The Lebanon range is accessible to him. They go up and down at will and bring lumber down. On the lumber they bring down I impose a tax. I have appointed tax inspectors over the customs houses of the entire Lebanon range, and they keep the watch on the harbor. I appointed a tax inspector for those who were going down into the custom houses which are in Sidon, but the Sidonians chased him away. Thereupon I sent the Itue contingent into the Lebanon range. They terrified the people, so that afterwards they sent a message and fetched the tax inspector, and brought him into Sidon. I spoke to them in these terms: bring down lumber, do your work on it, but do not deliver it to the Egyptians or Palestinians, Palaraztare, or I shall not let you go up to the mountains. Cited in Sags 2001, 155-157. 4 decades later, the Annals of the Sennacherib, a record of improvements in the Assyrian capital in c. 694 BC, mention the Palestinians. The annals speak of the people of Q and Hilaku, Pelistai and Tyre, Kuiu Hilaku Piles 2 Surari, Luckenbill 1924, 104, while another Assyrian record of his successor, the Treaty of Esarhaddon, in 675 BC identifies Duuri, Dor or Tanta, in the district of Piles T7, Pelistu or Peleset. An earlier Assyrian tablet, Sargon Tus Prism A, an inscription dating to c. 717 BC, which describes Sargon Tus campaigns, speaks of the incorporation of the region of Pelistu into the Assyrian Empire. Piles T or Piles II is the Assyrian name for the Philistines, while Peleset is the Egyptian name for one of the so-called sea peoples throughout the reigns of Rameses II and III. The land of the Peleset is used in an inscription from the reign of Rameses III. The Egyptian use of Peleset refers to indefinite areas which possibly include the southern and central coast, but might also include areas inland. Iron Age Philistia as a distinct polity, the country of the Peleset from Gaza to Tanta, 1207–12 BC. The Assyrian name Piles Te, also Pelistu Palashtu, Pelistu, Piles Te, Parlaraz Tare, Pelishti, Pelishtu, Pelistu, Pelistai, Pilistin, referred to an area that runs from Gaza to Tanta, and may include much larger areas inland. The Assyrian Philisti, Philistin, and Palashtu are Assyrian spellings of this name which are used variously. Perhaps it should be distinguished from the Assyrian provinces of Tanta to Akka, Megiddo, in the Jezreel Valley Marj ibn Amer, Samarina, the Central Highlands, and Sennacherib's Jerusalem, including Lachish, and possibly other regions. Over a period of 6 centuries, these names were found on a handful of Assyrian inscriptions. The Old Testament talks about a land of the Plishtim. In the Bible, the Mediterranean Sea was also known as the Sea of the Philistines, Exod 23:31, named after the people occupying a large portion of the shores of the Mediterranean. The Philistines were known in the Old Testament as Plishtim and their Mediterranean territory as Pleshit, Philistia, 1 Sam. 1736, 2 Samuel 1 verse 20, Judges 14 verse 3, Amos 1 verse 8. Most American and Israeli biblical scholars identify this Peleset with a somewhat historicized, but ultimately biblical land of the Philistines, that is, at least the coastal region from Gaza to Tanta. The militant myth narratives of the books of Joshua, Deuteronomy, and Samuel have provided modern Zionist settler nationalism with the muscular, militaristic and violent dimensions of the conquest of the land of Canaan and elimination of its indigenous people. The Book of Judges has also given Zionism another militarist tradition. The holy war stories associated with the real or imagined struggle against the Philistines, and the narrative of Samson, an Israelite hero, and cunning Delilah, who betrayed Samson on behalf of the Philistines of Gaza. Judge 16. Philistia of the Late Bronze Age and Iron Age was dominated by the Philistines and evolved into a distinct geopolitical entity with strong international trade links, a distinct economy and a sophisticated urban environment. The Philistines, a highly advanced people who, according to the Old Testament, ruled 5 famed pentapoli of Philistia: Gaza, Ascalon, Ashdod, Ekron, and Gath. Nisiolauskas 2011, 38, have, for centuries, suffered under the weight of their relentlessly negative portrayal in the books and stories of the Old Testament. From Goliath to Delilah, they have personified the intrinsically evil other in the burgeoning narrative myth of the nation of Israel, McDonough 2004. In the Old Testament, the Philistines were constructed as a typical ideological scapegoat, McDonough 2004. Modern European racism and biblical constructs and prejudices towards the Philistines have survived in the derogatory and offensive connotation of the modern Western term. A Philistine is a person ignorant of, or smugly hostile to, culture. Eben 1984. Rose 217. McDonough 2004. There are recent pro-Zionist sources which seem to suggest that PLST, Peleset, Philistines, was an area corresponding roughly to today's Gaza region. In fact, contrary to these propagandistic claims, from the late Bronze Age onwards, 1200 BC, the inhabiting the Mediterranean coastal region of Palestine, from Gaza in the south to Tanta in the north. In all probability, The land of the Peleset extends further north to Mount Carmel. Tanta is the normal international English name for Tantura. Palestinian Nakba of 19488 is located south of Haifa and 8 kilometers northwest of the Israeli town of Zikron Yaakov, founded in 1882, on the Mediterranean coast, 35 kilometers south of Haifa. Nearby Tantura, Tanta, is the ancient site referred to as Tel Dor, or Dora, by archaeologists. Tanta was the center of the Assyrian province of Tantura and controlled the coast north to Acre for about a century. Around 1100 BC, the Philistines expanded their inland territory eastwards to include the city of Beisan, later Scythopolis, an important strategic city located at the junction of the Jordan River and the plain of Esdraelon, Arabic, Marj ibn Amer. The large extent of the coastal region of the land of Peleset, Philistines, from Tanta in the north to Gaza in the south and including vast areas inland, suggests that the land of the Peleset was 15 to 20. Much of Greater Tel Aviv includes the cities of Holon and Petah Tikva, the latter known in Zionist historiography as Im Hamoshavot, the mother of the colonies. Tel Aviv is a city which grew out of and then consumed the ancient Palestinian city of Jaffa, whose indigenous inhabitants were driven out en masse in 1948, Rothbard 2015. The Tel Aviv metropolitan area, which, according to Avis Hai Margalit, of the Hebrew University of Jerusalem, had never been the historic homeland of the Jewish people, Margalit, A. 1991, constitutes Israel's largest conurbation with 3,700,000 residents, over 40% of the country's population. Overall, Israeli settler colonial collective memory links the ancient Philistines with the modern Arabic-speaking people of Palestine. Zionist ethnic cleansing tactics in the 1940 war against the Palestinians evidently adopted and adapted the legendary narrative of Samson's sacred war against the Philistines. Israelis officially named one of their Shuali Shimshon. It operated within the Givati Brigade, which took part in the expulsion of the Palestinians. Furthermore, a secret reconnaissance battalion of the same Samson's Foxes was re-established by the Israeli army in 2002 to back its occupation of the Gaza Strip, a region to which Israeli, biblicist, collective memory links to the ancient Philistines. The fox logo of the Israeli Army's Southern Command is all designed to foster the same collective and Israeli struggle against the indigenous people of Palestine. The highly developed cities of Philistia. Throughout much of the Philistia flourished on strong international trade links and, as we shall see below, developed the first monetary system of Palestine in the late 6th early 5th century BC. Terrestrial excavations and underwater archaeology of shipwrecks of Philistia have revealed that the Philistines were a highly civilized people. They were sophisticated seafarers and highly accomplished architects and urban planners, highly artistic potters and weavers and ivory and metalworkers. Han 1992. Like the Phoenicians, the Philistines developed advanced naval technology which probably enhanced their reputation as seafaring people. Although their origin, Aegean or Near Eastern, has been seriously disputed among scholars, Berlin 1997, with the most recent research suggesting they were an indigenous people of the Levant, Evian 2017, there are good reasons to assume that the evolution of the highly advanced resembled, to some extent, the evolution of Greek polis. In time, and more noticeably during the Hellenic and Roman periods, several cities in Palestine, especially Ascalon in the south and Ptolemy, Acre, in the north, would evolve into typical Greek polis. The Greek term polis, plural polis, cities, continued to evolve in the course of the ancient period as the ancestor of city, state, and eventually citizenship. The Greek term polis, Arabic Medina, persisted in Hellenic, Roman and Byzantine periods and became common to the naming of cities in Roman and Greek-speaking Byzantine Palestine. It is also found in modern Palestine in the adapted name of the Palestinian city of Nablus, originally Neapolis. However, the historical evolution of Nablus, New, and Ilia al-Quds Jerusalem into the key Arab Islamic Madinas in Palestine did not result in cities very different from the earlier Greco-Roman Byzantine polis. Greek-Roman Byzantium and is Still much inevitable old city of Jerusalem, one of the best preserved medieval cities in the world. Like Gaza, Caesarea Maritima, and other polinas in Palestine, Nablus, Gaza, Ascalon, Acre, and the medieval Islamic city of Jerusalem are classic examples which exhibit both historical continuities and continuous processes of adaptation and transformation of the rich urban landscape of Palestine. Furthermore, the Greco-Roman polis dominated development of the center of governance in the city to signify state, which included its surrounding villages, and this form of governance, the city with its surrounding villages, is also evident in Byzantine and Islamic Palestine. However, it should be pointed out that the Greek polis were other primordial ancient city-states in the Near East like Sidon and Tyre, which were ruled by a king or a small oligarchy, but rather were political entities ruled by their bodies of citizens. The strong tradition of trading and the technological innovations during that period, and the nature of Philistine civilization, a highly developed and influential Mediterranean culture and polity, have all been confirmed by recent archaeological excavations. The archaeology of Philistia has shown that the Philistine states had a highly sophisticated culture, in fact far logical development. From Iron Palestine, Israeli excavated archaeological evidence for this high level of development of the coast of Philistia was found outside the northern border of the modern city of Tel Aviv, the Israeli metropolis, mother city. Founded by East European Jewish settlers in 1909 and effectively the capital of the Zionist Yishuv settler colony in Palestine until 1948, in the remains of Tel Kasil, a Philistine town which formed a thriving harbor town through the 12th–10th centuries BC. These archaeological discoveries were deposited in the Eretz Museum on the campus of Tel Aviv University, a historical and archaeological museum in the Ramat Aviv neighborhood of Tel Aviv. The campus of Tel Aviv University itself was constructed from ruins of an ancient Philistine town and a modern Palestinian village, Ul-Sheikh Muwanis, depopulated by the Haganah in March 1948. Throughout the Iron Age natural, two powerful trading neighbors, Egypt and Phoenicia, but also cultivated flourishing international trade with the Aegean region in the west and Arabia in the south. This neighborhood was shrewdly exploited by the Philistines, used it to develop their international trade links, economy, and a distinct geopolitical region and material culture. Ben Shlomo 2010, Thompson Ben Shlomo 2010-2016. The trade-based economy of Philistia was also a major unifying factor in a country which was shaped by polytheism and cultural hybridity. The Philistines integrated with other local populations and lived in coastal port towns, and their cities were ruled by autonomous kings, and their populations were mixed and integrated with other indigenous populations of Palestine. Pottery remains excavated in ancient cities such as Gaza, Jaffa, Ekron, Ashdod, Ascalon, and Gath, decorated with stylized birds, provide archaeological evidence for highly developed Philistine cities in ancient Palestine. Ships sailing along the eastern Mediterranean coast between Egypt and Phoenicia used the harbors of Philistia, Gaza, Ascalon, Ashdod, Jaffa, and Tanta Dor to replenish supplies and take shelter in stormy weather. Crucially, the cities of Philistia controlled the international trade route of the Via Maris, Way of the Philistines, and charged the trade caravans tolls for passing through their region. Gallagher 1999, 113. The great trading cities of Philistia were not only credited with introducing iron weapons and chariots to ancient Palestine, but, as we shall, and coinage system in Palestine. Regional and distant trade was a key factor in shaping the history of ancient Palestine and must have contributed to the introduction of the coinage of Philistia, which also became known as Philisto-Arabian coins, struck in the period 538–332 BC, see below. The integration population resulted in the geographically, but hardly ethnically, distinctive region of Philistia, which was tightly linked to the international trade routes. These followed the Via Maris, on the one hand, through the Nile and in the direction of northern Mesopotamia, and, on the other hand, continued along the coast to the Phoenician seaports of northern Palestine and southern Lebanon. Under Assyrian patronage, Palestine's expansive trading politics not only dominated the coastal economy but, over the course of the Iron II period, created an integrated South. Arab trade supported the processing of grains, fruits from the northern Negev and coastal plain with the sheep and wool, olives and wines from the Judean foothills and highlands. Among the southern coast's most important towns were Jaffa, Afik, Ekron, Ashdod, Gimti, Taulas Sofi, Askelon, and Gaza. Thompson 2016, 165. Ashdod, supported militarily by Egypt, the Assyrian king Sargon II, reigned 722 to 705 BC, invaded Pilish to oust the king of Ashdod-Imani and annexed the whole region. Philistia was brought under direct Assyrian control, in effect becoming an Assyrian province, Thompson 2016, 165, although the king of Ashdod was allowed to remain on the throne, Gallagher 1999, 115. By the time Sargon II died, he had two provinces in Philistia, Dor, Tanta, and Ashdod, a reliable king in Gaza and a clearly defined border with Egypt, Gallagher 1999, 115. And the historic road of Via Maris. West to east is another striking feature. The great importance of the country as a juncture of trade, industry, technology, and monetarism, as well as agricultural innovation, and the importance of the famous Via Maris, the Way of the Sea, also known as Way of the Philistines, can hardly be overstated. Historically, Palestine fully exploited its geopolitical as a transit country serving international trade and linking three different continents. Both the Philistines and Phoenicians controlled much of the Levant of Philistia and Phoenicia, modern Lebanon, and the Way of the Philistines, or Via Maris, was described in Exodus as the way of the land of the Philistines, Old Testament, Derech Eretz Plishtim, 1317. Much of the evidence concerning this route comes from Egyptian and Assyrian sources. The section connecting cementing Egypt with Palestine, Gaza was described. It was an important international coastline dating from the early Bronze Age. It was the most important historic route from Egypt to the Levant, and linked Egypt with Palestine and the Fertile Crescent throughout all historical periods. Along its route, most of the important cities in the country sprang up, including Gaza, ancient Egypt's administrative capital of Palestine, Ashdod, Isdad, Askelon, Ascalon, Joppa, Jaffa, Tanta, Tantura, and later Caesarea Palestina. It followed the coastal plain of North Sinai and Palestine and Tanta before veering northeastwards, with alternative roads through Wadi Ara into Marj Ibn Amer, the Baba, and northwards towards present Tanta northwards along the Syrian coast. This international trade highway of Palestine was crisscrossed other trading routes in the country, including from Jaffa to Jerusalem, from Marj Ibn Amer in the north to the Jordan Valley in the east, and from the rich port city of Gaza in the south to the wealthy trading town of Petra, originally known to its literate Nabatean Arabs as Rakmu, in the east, and via the long-distance spice trade and incense route of Arabia and the Yemen. The Nabatean Arab trade flourished across southern Palestine and northern Arabia. Not surprisingly, for practical reasons, the earliest form of Arabic script, also known as the Kufi script, which evolved from the Nabatean Aramaic and Proto-Arabic scripts, which, in turn, can be traced to the Phoenician alphabet, evolved under the impact of these important trade routes of Palestine and Arabia and the growing urbanization of the Arab Near East. Philisto-Arabian autonomy in Philistia, 6th to 4th centuries BC. Although coming under imperial, the highly advanced cities of Philistia, or Philistin, were the first to develop a monetary system in Palestine, and Philistia was the first region in the country to witness a movement from bullion to a coin economy and Palestinian currency struck in Gaza from 538 BC until the occupation of Palestine by Alexander the Great in 332 BC. Subsequently, an ancient Greek-style currency, drachma, was struck in several Palestinian cities, including Gaza, Ascalon, Joppa, Jaffa, and Acre. The drachma gave rise to the silver dirham, the Arabic coin whose name derives from the drachma. The coinage of Philistia of the 6th–4th centuries BC refers to the much-discussed group of silver coins of the 6th, 5th, and 4th centuries, minted by the autonomous rulers of the Palestinian cities of Gaza, Ascalon, and Ashdod, and these coins represent the earliest and most significant phase of the development of money in redevelopment. Continued in the 4th century, Persian rule over Palestine. Philistia's early coinage consisted of silver and plated coins. Some of the famous and unique pieces of this large collection are the coin widely in the Philisto-Arabian region and became known as Philisto-Arabian coins. The iconography of the coinage of Philistia was influenced by a melange of Greek, Sidonian, Achaemenid, Egyptian and local Palestinian sources and patterns. Hill 1914, 2011, Tal 2016, Gittler and Tal 2006. The presence of Greek archaic silver coins, with Indian artistic influences, was noted by several authors, and the most striking influence on the Philistia coinage is notably Athenian. The people of Philistia observed these foreign motifs and adopted and adapted them to local use. Tal 2016, 253. The iconography also represents the most miscellaneous lineage of deities of Assyria, Egypt, Greece, and Palestine.